Hello to our parents and families joining us today. My name is Lexi McCarthy, and I'm the Director of Parent and Family Relations here at Westchester University. Welcome to our Chapter 11 chat. This chat is a part of our Summer Family Common Read series, where we're discussing chapters of Marjorie Savage's You're on Your Own, but I'm Here If You Need Me. We will hold chapter chat sessions like this one throughout the summer on Facebook to discuss different chapters with Westchester experts. And we'll end the summer with the chapter chat with Marjorie Savage herself, so stay tuned for that. Today, I am thrilled to have Dr. Tammy Hilliard-Thompson with me from the Office of Student Conduct to discuss Chapter 11. Welcome, Dr. Hilliard-Thompson.
Thank you so much, Lexi. I appreciate being here.
Absolutely. Well, if you wouldn't mind, if you could just introduce yourself, share a little bit about your role at Westchester and something that you believe makes Westchester special.
Yes. Again, my name is Tammy. So thank you again for having me here. I have the opportunity to serve as an assistant director and a hearing officer in the Office of Student Conduct. And my role is to assist students with understanding how their decisions impact their career aspirations as well as their future and the university community. What we do pretty much is help students understand, their behavior, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, while they're on campus, while they're off campus, when they're studying abroad, when they're doing an internship. So just making sure they understand what is allowed and what is not allowed, and then also supporting them in any way that we can. And pretty much that's what we do is also make sure they understand policy and procedures as it relates to conduct.
And then something that makes Westchester special.
Oh, by far, our students, definitely. I would say hands down, our students is what makes this job, not even a job. Something that I look forward to is just the ideas that they have, the stories that they share, the excitement that they bring about their future. Sometimes the challenges that they share with you, that they trust you in sharing information. So I would say by far and hands down, our students is what makes this university special.
Awesome. You're definitely not alone in saying that students are what make Westchester special. So thank you for that. So let's start digging into the chapter. So chapter 11, Savage discusses student conduct and instances where students' decisions clash with family values. I prepared a few questions I'm hoping we can discuss, and then would love to hear how you believe it applies to Westchester. Should we get started?
Absolutely.
Cool. So first and foremost, what conversation should families have with their students about campus conduct prior to arriving on campus?
I would definitely say to read and be familiar with the student code of conduct. When students read that and they understand it or they ask questions, they definitely fare well at the university, much better than those students that are not familiar with the student code of conduct. And I would also say that families can encourage their students not just to read the student code of conduct, but any document or resource on campus that shows and demonstrates what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. So for instance, the guide to residential living could be a tool, the student occupancy agreement if you're living on campus, even your lease agreement off campus. So anything that has guiding principles, expectations, policies, procedures, maybe even the law, I would say those are things that families can encourage their students to be familiar with prior to arriving to campus. And the second thing I would offer too is that parents can be very instrumental in sharing with their students to pause before they make a decision. Pause, evaluate, what are your options, and then make a choice. And hopefully the choice is a healthy and wise choice. And then also, what are the potential outcomes? So those are things that I would recommend that families can do and to support their students prior to coming to campus.
Super helpful and great advice. We all probably could take some advice about pausing before we make decisions, right?
Absolutely.
And the students can find the code of conduct on the student conduct website.
Correct. We also, before they arrive to campus, they'll receive information. Typically, it is a link from our office where they can read the student code of conduct. And then a lot of the information that they receive, they'll see it embedded in that information.
Okay.
But yes, it's located on our website, on the Office of Student Conduct's website.
Great, thanks. So what specific areas of the code of conduct are most important for them to review, for students and families to review?
I would say all of it. Of course, we want our families and we want our students to read all of it. But if I had to highlight some very important point with the caveat that all of it is important, I would say Their rights and options. That's a critical piece to the student code of conduct. What is your right when you're in a conduct process? What are your options? What choices do you have? I mean, it's very important that they understand that. And then also, even if they don't, sometimes our students do not read the student code of conduct. We will explain it to them to make sure they have a good understanding of their rights and options, because we want our process to always be fair, which it is, fair and impartial. I would also say that another critical portion of the student code of conduct is report filing. Sometimes there's a concern, not just for a student, but for a family member. And anyone that is a part of anyone that is a part of the university, a community member, a stakeholder, can file a report at any time. So it's important that they understand what that process looks like. How do I find the form? Where is the link? And so all that information too is on our website, where even if it's just a concern, it might not even be a violation. A student or a family member can use our report writing system to file a report. It's also important to know what our violations are. What will get me in trouble? What is some of the laws that we are bound to, follow? All of them, of course, but there's some specific ones that students tend to violate sometimes when they're not familiar with it. Sanctions is very important as well. What are the outcomes? What are the consequences for inappropriate behavior? It's so key to know that before you make a decision, because that might deter the decision that you were about to make as a student. I would also say the appeals process. If a student meets the criteria, they can always appeal. We encourage appeals. Maybe they've changed their mind after they, participated in the conduct process, and they decided that, what, I don't like this outcome, or maybe I should have shared this with the committee at the time. As long as they, stay within the 5 days after receiving their outcome, they can appeal, and as long as they meet the criteria. The last thing I would say is also, for any of our students that are going to be involved, which we hope that that's all students, to understand the group information. If you're involved in a club, an organization, a fraternity, a sorority, the band, there are guidelines there as well. And we want you to understand that there are certain things that are not allowed or we see as inappropriate. And so when you understand what those things are, you're more inept to be successful at the university, more um, in line with making positive decisions. So those are some of the areas that are key areas. But Lexi, if I had to get my way, I would definitely say read the entire student code of conduct.
Sure, that's great advice. I really like the piece about the group conduct too, because so much of the behavior that takes place on campus is with groups of students, and it's important that students understand the pieces of the code of conduct that apply to that group membership as well, where sometimes it feels like that might be separate from individual behavior. So that's
Absolutely.
great advice.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So how can families support their students if they should find themselves in the conduct process with your office?
First and foremost, and you're going to hear me repeat this throughout this session, is just being familiar with the student code of conduct and the conduct process. What's going to happen. I remember there are a few students that I kind of taken under my wing, and the first thing they did was call me when they were documented for an alleged violation of policy. And my first line of defense to them was, did you read the student code of conduct? Do you know what's going to happen in the conduct process? And it's easier for me to explain it, but it's better if they read it. So families should definitely encourage their student to read the conduct process so they know what's going to happen. And then also follow the conduct procedures. There are procedures outlined in our process that it goes much smoother if a student understands what's going to happen. Sometimes it can decrease anxiety. Sometimes it can decrease nervousness if they understand the process. And then we're there as a hearing officer. That's one of our main roles, is to make sure that they understand the process, to make sure that they understand, what's going to happen. And then what options that they have, back to the students' rights and option guide again. They have rights and they have options, and we want to make sure that they understand those. um, Families can also support a student if they find themselves in the conduct process by serving as an advisor if they can, or recommending an advisor. An advisor can be anyone. It can be a student, it can be a pastor, it can be a parent, it can be an attorney. The only person that it cannot be is a witness that was involved in the incident. And so when we have students that attend the process, be it virtually or in person, we find that they have more support. The advisor can ask questions to the student of things that maybe they didn't think of, did you tell her this, or did you tell him that, or did you tell them that? So there are different things that they may want to um, add to the process by serving as an advisor. In some cases, students do not know people who they feel comfortable with serving as an advisor. So one of the things that they can do is we also have what's called policy process advisor. That's a new resource that's been added within the last 2 years. That's also information that's included in the conduct notification, but it's also information that's on our website. So if you read it prior to the conduct process, and hopefully you won't be involved in the conduct process, they can reach out to different employees on campus who are trained in conduct process. And that is also a tool that's being widely used now. So I would encourage all family members to share that information and remind students before anything occurs, but definitely if something should occur.
That's great advice. And I will also add, to toot the horn of the student conduct office, there's a really great website. The website's really strong too, and it provides a lot of that process and procedure. There's a flow chart that's really strong on the website too. So to accompany the reading of the code of conduct. So great
Absolutely,
resources
absolutely,
available.
absolutely.
Awesome.
Let me add one more thing that I forgot to say. Families can also encourage their students to write down the facts. If you forget, sometimes you're really nervous, you're anxious, sometimes things happen really quickly. But if they encourage them to sit down and write down what happened, then they have an outline of maybe details that they thought weren't important, but that'll be very important in the conduct process. So definitely documenting the incident themselves.
Perfect. That's such great advice. I'm a policy process advisor myself, and that is something that's so important because sometimes those meetings just go really quickly and there's so much anxiety involved that they forget to mention things that are really important, that were very important in their conversation with me as a policy and process advisor. So that's really great advice.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So my next question is, how should families encourage self-advocacy when mistakes happen?
That's a great question. I think the first thing that they should do is encourage their student to share their story. We find sometimes that it's difficult for students to share their story, whatever it is. Sometimes they're, not necessarily the person who has committed a violation, but maybe they're the person that the violation has been committed, towards. And so we encourage family members to tell their students to write down their story, or vice versa, write down the reason why they made the decision that they made. So they want to encourage them to do that. They also want to encourage them to tell the truth, be honest. It is very helpful when our students are forthcoming with information. There is a part of our process where they can choose not to share information, and we understand that. But when they do, we can fill in the story, if you will. Sometimes the story has gray areas or it has holes, and our goal too is to understand, your guiding principles as to why you made this decision, what happened. Maybe there were some extenuating circumstances. And so when we're able to know the whole story, it helps us to be able to figure out what is the best course of action for that particular student. So family members can, encourage students to be a part of the process and be honest. I mentioned before about documenting. They can also students can be an advocate, and families can support that by telling them to keep a log. Maybe they're not ready yet to report or share why they made the decision they made, or why someone else made a decision that maybe they witnessed or they were involved in. So keep a log. At some point in time, that student may feel a little bit more confident, in sharing what occurred. And so that can also be helpful. Report it. It is difficult sometimes for our students to report information, and we understand that. We get it. Um, Sometimes they don't want other people to know that they're reporting it, but they're being impacted. Or as an example, maybe a student is living on or off campus, and maybe their apartment mate or their roommate has alcohol, and maybe the student themselves is underage, or they're not into consuming alcohol. And so that is a very uncomfortable situation. Sometimes it's difficult for our students to report, policy violations or violations of law. But again, we're encouraging them to make some type of decision. because we don't want them to be documented or held accountable for something maybe they weren't responsible for. So report it. Students can also report information anonymously. Of course, we hope that they attach their name to it, but anonymous information is better than no information, and we'll take that anytime. Um, I would also say to tell someone, the faculty member, staff member, another student, a family member, a coach, a pastor, tell someone, because when you tell someone, at least you also have another person that is aware of what was occurring. And maybe at that time you were intimidated, or maybe you just felt so uncomfortable with coming forward. So those are some things that they can advocate. Families can advocate for their students to do, and some resources to use.
Such helpful advice. The next question I have is about values exploration. And so Marjorie Savage talks about this a lot in chapter 11 about how college is a time of this values exploration. What's your take? Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like at Westchester, and how families can be supportive?
Sure. I would recommend that families encourage their students to align themselves with the right folks. And when I say the right folks, I mean, there are faculty, staffs, other students that are going in the right direction. And when I say the right direction, they're about community service, serving the community. They're about growth and development. They're about leadership skills, enhancing their leadership skills. Just making society and the world better is really what it boils down to. So when students align themselves with those individuals that maybe they see align with their values, they tend to have a better outcome at the university than those students that step away from their values or the different things that they've brought to the university. Um, I would also say that they can also join some of the myriad of clubs and organizations that we have, because when you take the time to just research what we have on campus and you look for the things that are of interest to you. So maybe, you're interested in giving back to the community. And so you might want to look into the Center for Civic Engagement and Social Impact, or an organization in our fraternity and sorority life office. Maybe you want to support the LGBTQA community. And so maybe you should look into or contact the Center for Trans and Queer Advocacy. Or maybe your values align with social justice work. There's the Dowdy Multicultural Center. Again, there's the Center for Civic Engagement and Social Impact. There's a Center for Trans and Queer Advocacy. So there's a bunch of things on campus that a student can really just take a moment to investigate and research and try to align their values and their interests with what we have on campus. I don't want to miss faculty. There are a lot of our students that align with faculty to get internships and to volunteer and to just, touch base with someone to be their mentor. And then that way they're also moving in the direction that, one, they want to move in, but two, that aligns with their values. So I would recommend, reaching out to individuals or departments or faculty that seem to be of interest. But we also do that too. We also reach out to students. We shoulder tap students. We shoulder tap groups to say, hey, here's something that you might be interested in. But as it relates to conduct, we also do that too. Like, one of our questions during the conduct process is, what is your career aspiration? What was your goal when you decided to be a member of Westchester University, and more importantly, a Golden Ram? Like, what was the goal? And so students will pause for a minute and just think and just say, you know what, I'm supposed to be a lawyer, or I want to be a physical therapist, or my goal is to be a teacher. And one of the things that I've seen, Lexi, is their face lights up when you ask them about the goal, which then we realign with their values. And then we ask the question of, so how does the decision that you made, that you chose to make, align with what you just shared? Right. And then we also see students that tell us all the time, I just want you to know, this is not my true personality. This is not me. This is not, and we know that already. We know that one decision or two does not define who you are. So those are some recommendations that I would make.
Students are so lucky to have an office of folks that understand that students make mistakes and it's not who they really are. So I'm grateful to have colleagues like you that feel that way, because it's so important. And I think giving students the grace and the empathy to make some tough decisions and then grapple with them and discover what their values are. So such a powerful experience.
Yeah. Can I offer one more thing?
Yeah.
I'll share with our families that unfortunately and fortunately, I went through the conduct process as a first year student at Montclair State, and it shaped and changed everything. You know, the experience itself for me at the time was so intimidating. There wasn't a lot of information provided. I mean, I had to wait until this date, the date of my meeting, and it just seemed like it was forever. And I remember calling home to my mom, and I was upset, you know, and she was very supportive. And she did ask me the question, were you aware of the policy that you violated? And I said yes. And she said, you know, of course, she said, well, Tammy, you know better, you know, and again, values and aligning what she had taught me and what my father had taught me before they sent me off to college. And that has shaped the way I do conduct work. And my colleagues too, we talk about why we do this work and how we enjoy it. And it's because we have either great experiences or we had not so great experiences. And the goal is for a student to have a fair experience where we're not intimidating, where we help them understand the decision they made, hopefully, and then how that impacts all the things that they just said they want to do. You know,
Right.
the lawyer, the physical therapist, the teacher. And so that's truly why we do the work we do and why we do it the way that we do it.
Well, that's awesome. That's great. Thanks for sharing that and being vulnerable. I myself was part of some processes myself, right? Like we all had experiences in college that
Right.
shaped who we are and
Right.
bring us to this
Absolutely.
work. So
Absolutely.
I think that's really powerful and important and something that's very characteristic of Westchester. So families listening, you know that we're humans and we get that your students are humans and that you're humans and you're navigating this world just like we are.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
my last question is about hoping that you can talk a little bit about the notion of family values clashing with student values. As Savage really ends that chapter about talking about like, how do you have those conversations with your students when the family values and the decisions that have been made as a family differ from those values and the decisions students are making?
Right. That's a great question. One of the things that we know and that we see is that prior to students coming to college, their values are not going to always coincide with what they see on campus, on and off campus. And so we offer and we ask them to pause for a second because it's so important for them to remember why they chose Westchester University and why they're choosing the major or the field or the interest or the clubs that they're choosing. And again, I'm going to go back to the whole pause for a minute, because we also understand that our students, they want to they want to be in a social group, they want to be in a social network, you know, they want to have friends, they want to make friends if they don't already have friends on campus, they want to have fun. So we know that, yes, you know, a college campus is for us to pursue our career aspirations and our goals, but we also understand there's a life outside of outside of classes. And so we always ask them to ask themselves, how does this decision I'm about to make align with my career aspirations, my student leadership position, my team goals, whatever it is, my internship, my clinicals. And so we know that there are going to be other individuals that are engaging in inappropriate behavior, because if there wasn't, we wouldn't have the student code of conduct. We wouldn't need it, right? We wouldn't need our office. You wouldn't need, you know, or Dr. Tammy Hilliard Thompson or all my colleagues within the office. And so if they can pause for a second and ask that question, they still may make the decision that they were going to make in the first place, but maybe not. And what we see in the conduct process when we talk to students is they have already evaluated the decision they've made, and they've already realized that, you know what, this wasn't a right decision. This wasn't a healthy decision. This wasn't a wise decision. This is the things that they tell us during the conduct process. But there are a few that do not make the connection that this is not aligned with my values. And so we're advocating that they pause and think about the choices that they're about to make, or the options that are out there, and more importantly, the outcome, you know, the consequences. If I do A, what could possibly happen? If I choose B, what could possibly happen? So the pause, evaluate, and then make a decision is what we're advocating for. And then also, we want them to have fun, right? We want all our students to have fun. I went to school and was looking for fun. But we like to remind students that remember why you're here. You're also here to just basically change the world, impact communities, to have a future that you're passionate about, to contribute to society and doing things that, again, you're passionate about. And so, as long as they can keep their values at the forefront and keep reminding themselves why they're here and what their families have taught to them, what the expectations are at home or wherever, they're coming from, then there's a great opportunity that sometimes those decisions are not going to be made that are inappropriate. But again, if they're looking at possible outcomes, especially when it comes to their major, because sometimes when your values do not align with your decisions, it can impact you being in a specific major. And so we want them to know that too as well before decisions are made.
Great advice. I like that tie back to the majors too, because I think that students realize that late sometimes, that they can't have certain things on their record and still become a teacher or a police officer or whatever that may
Absolutely.
be. So great advice.
Absolutely.
So we end all of our chapter chats with the final word of wisdom that Dr. Hilary Thompson might be related to the conduct process or not. So if you could share one final piece of advice with the RAM fam, what would you share?
I would say know the code. And if I may, know the code. That's my phrase, no matter where I go.
I love it.
Know the code. And if I can, I'd like to share a second one. Enjoy yourself, have fun. Just pause, weigh your options, think about possible outcomes, and remember why you're a golden ram. That would be my advice.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Hilary Thompson, for your time. I really enjoyed our conversation today, and I really appreciate your ongoing support of our RAM fam. Thank you to our viewers. If you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me at parentfamilyrelations@wcupa.edu. And I'm going to invite Dr. Hilary Thompson to do what we always do at the end of phone calls, which is Rams up, everyone.
Rams up.